Welcome to the State of the Media panel, which is being co-sponsored by the University of North Florida, Department of Communication, and the Florida Times Union. I'm John Parmley, chair of the department, and today we have professionals in advertising, journalism, and public relations who are going to be talking today about media trends, things that are coming up on the horizon that those in mass media should know about, and things to watch out for. And as we go through, the format basically is that each panelist then will go through and just talk a little bit about media trends. And then once we've gone through each panelist, we'll open it up to Q&A. So I guess we'll go ahead and we'll start with Victoria.
Oh my. Media trends or public relations trends?
PR trends in your case.
Oh, okay.
Or any kind of trends.
Well, trends fall fashion this year. No, I think, my perspective, I think, is kind of, is a little split here. I spent more than 20 years as a journalist. I did investigations, I did politics and education, features, consumer, personal finance, those kinds of things. And I still very much to this day feel I'm a journalist at heart. Because where I happen to work at Walt Disney World, they're also all about storytelling. But instead of writing necessarily articles or doing radio spots, their storytelling for our guests are things like our resorts and our attractions, even the plate of food you get and how it's laid out and the ingredients that they use and how they use their ingredients. So I think the trend that we see and the trend that we think is always going to be in fashion is storytelling. And how do we at Walt Disney World how does any public relations professional tell the story of their client, of their product, of their service? And how does that entice or compel media to cover that product, service, or person? And how does that compel the viewer, reader, surfer, guest to engage? And engage could be commenting, engage could be buying a ticket or buying this dress, or just even commenting and having an opinion about it. So to me, the trend will always be storytelling. It just kind of depends on what tools you're using.
Well, we have a lot of similarities in that because storytelling is absolutely a big part of what we do here at the Times Union. I'm the managing editor. My name is Mary Kelly Polka, and I oversee all of our news gathering, the presentation of what you see in print and online, Florida Times Union and Jacksonville.com. And a big part of what we are doing is storytelling, and our story is about our community. It's a big part of our role in our community is to tell you what is happening in front of you, the insight into that, the why it is happening, the how more than you might just be able to get by going online yourself and maybe looking at a blog or watching a meeting yourself, maybe some of the things behind the scenes that otherwise you wouldn't get. The biggest thing that we see for ourselves here at the Times Union is we find that our role is to be the watchdogs. And that is how we tell the story of Jacksonville. We hold government officials accountable. We hold businesses accountable. We hold everyone accountable. And it's what we've always done. And it's what we will always be doing. There have been times when there's been more of a conversation. Do we do shorter? Do we have less time to kind of dive in and dig into the meatier things? And what we've determined is, no, this is just our fundamental role. We are here to tell you the bigger picture stuff that you would not get if not for the press. It's what our friends in television do. We have other local papers here, and it is something that we specialize in on some of the things that we just have a little bit more time, a little bit more space. So whether that's unfunded liabilities in your pension, if it is government officials texting behind the scenes and you don't know how they're making their decisions, whatever the issue might be, that's what we think will always be our role. Now, how we do it has changed. We have to get that out there faster. We have to get it online when it's happening. We use social media a lot more than we ever did. Just even a year ago. I mean, we are constantly changing how we are getting it to you. But what we do, that's what we've been doing for a long time. Somebody had. Okay. I don't know if are these amplifying with the
Can I fill them out?
Those are for the camera.
Okay, I will tell you there are other seats over here, and I don't know if you guys want to come over. You might have a little easier time. Can you hear in the back? Because I'm usually pretty loud, so I want to make sure. But there are a ton of other seats in front, but we'll also try to amplify our voices.
Okay. I would agree with the ladies here about storytelling. My degree is in broadcast journalism from the University of Florida, and I moved back home after that and worked at First Coast News for a few years before I got into marketing. And since I've been in marketing, storytelling has still been a huge deal. For every company I've worked for, I've written stories and marketed that content to our target audience. And I recently started my own business where I combine journalism and marketing to tell the stories of my clients. And I'd speak to friends who are in the national industry for marketing and journalism, and they all say the term, specifically storytelling, is a big trending term. Also, content curation, which I find to be what you develop as you're learning someone's story and learning how to tell it, that you're drafting content as you do that, and knowing how to write it well and be able to tell that story is essential, I feel, to every industry, because every industry does have a communications department or person, and so writing and storytelling, I believe, is something that can keep you current in all industries.
Well, I'm Rob Sweeting with Channel 4, part-time, but nonetheless. The industry, I tell you, it is changing a lot, and social media is the driver of that change. Every news department you will find, even the newspaper, they have a social media department. We have, at Channel 4, we have someone who is specifically in charge of social media. And it is growing. I tell you, ever since news went 24/7, that 24-hour news cycle, it has just taken off. And now there are so many ways for you to get your news from your phone, from your tablets, whatever. But a lot of people are using Twitter to get their news. As a matter of fact, 59% of the people who use Twitter, that's how they get their news. They don't sit down and watch television. You don't have to sit down and watch television to get breaking news. You can get it on your phone. So social media has really changed the industry. And even older people, old people like me, they're getting into social media. For example, people older than 35, they're getting their news from Facebook and from Twitter. It's gone up something like 13 and 15% just in the past couple of years. I use Twitter a little bit, maybe not as much as I should, but I'm constantly getting these alerts saying, John Doe is following you on Twitter. I ask myself, why? I mean, I never tweet, so why are you following me? But more and more people are using Twitter for their news, and as a matter of fact, breaking news, you can probably get it from your phone faster than you can get it on TV. So that's, to me, the big change, and the state of this industry is really growing in terms of social media. I still drive people to our television station on Facebook. This is happening. Watch the news at such certain hour, and I'll tell you more. So we use social media in that respect to drive viewers to our TV station. But I would say, in terms of the state of the media, social media it's exploding. It's blowing up. And if you want to be part of this trend, you might want to consider getting a Twitter account if you don't already have one.
Wonderful. So this is the part where we go into Q&A. And so any questions from the crowd? And the way it's going to work is we have a roving microphone person. Where is the roving microphone person? Who will go through. Is over there. And so when you want to speak, raise your hand, and the microphone comes to you.
all of you, I know a number of you, as a former full-time and currently a semi-retired freelancer, I am concerned with where the news is going to come from in the future. You can get the headlines on Twitter. You get your friends' reactions on Facebook. You get the pictures on Pinterest. But where is the hard news coming from? Because as social media takes over, the money that has supported newspapers dries up. And advertisers are moving to social media. And this really concerns me as someone who no longer sits in a newsroom and gets to hear the real story as it happens.
Well, we're still here and we're still going strong. Thank you to my former colleague who worked with me for years here. It is different without a doubt, but this is what I believe, and I think Rob can probably, I think he's seen something very similar. You are right. People are turning to social media to get answers. I'm looking on social media when something is happening to see if I can find out what's going on, but I think people will always want the credible news sources.
Yeah.
I think everyone understands that because we've all seen it. Something gets shared and all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not really what happened, or that was an old story from 2 years ago. That happened not long ago when the boys were missing off the coast of Florida, and there was a news article that was circulating on Facebook, and I read it. I remember thinking, whoa, did we know this? That they had been found. Well, they had not been found. There had been 2 other boys who had gone missing 2 years or whatever before who had been found. Mm-hmm. I think every time something like that happens, every time people start to get information that everybody's trying to just get out really, really quickly. Law enforcement sometimes just in their haste that it's not always completely accurate immediately. I think it causes people to slow down and turn to that credible news source. But here's the thing, just like Rob said, we're on social media. All of our reporters are putting their things out there. They're having conversations. If they're at meetings, they're telling you about what's happening at those meetings. So I think our job is to help keep the conversation at a level where it should be of credibility and giving you the facts, which is what our job is. I don't oversee the editorial page side of things. Mine's not about opinion. It's just telling you what's happening so that you can form your own opinion. I don't think that has changed. You're right. You commented about advertising, and certainly advertisers have a lot of other ways that they can invest their money, and probably limited money that they have. You don't have as much when you're on the corporate side of things to be putting into telling your story. So you're determining where you want to put that. We're still strong. We still have plenty of revenue to help us do our jobs right now. We are looking to the future and how we do that, where else we're getting our revenue from to be able to continue doing what we do today. Because we know many cities have seen what happens when the media goes away. We're just a fundamental part of a constructive society where people are doing what is right. And when you stop looking, when you stop covering public entities, you never know what they're going to be doing. And often we're telling you that story a few years later when we get a chance to kind of dive in.
I think one of the most important things she said, and that is a credible news source. We will always need a credible news source. I talk about getting your news from Twitter. Well, you can't trust all of it all the time. People in haste trying to get it onto Twitter can sometimes get the facts a little wrong. It's always good to have that credible source to go back to, and I think that's what newspapers do. And newspapers are beginning to, I think, adjust finally to this new world of social media as well as electronics. I have an account with the Times Union online. How about you?
Thank you.
So it's $99 a year. A little advertising there. I also have an account with the Washington Post that I can go online and get my news. But you will always, like you said, be that credible. Have to go back to that credible source, and I don't see that drying up. I don't see that going away.
And we've had to adjust along the way. And you mentioned 24/7 news channels. So when CNN came along, I mean, and Judy, you remember from when you were here, I mean, there was a time when we waited to put everything into today's newspaper, and you didn't know anything we were working on unless you happened to be the person we were asking questions of, until you saw it on your front doorstep that morning. But we realized years ago we couldn't wait because everyone was having the conversation, and they weren't necessarily waiting until the 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 11 o'clock newscast. They were talking about it all day, and so we had to adjust how we were doing things, and now it's a constant adjustment to how we do things. So we are using social media, and we're having the conversation sometimes there, bringing them back to our website, but it is a constant thing to bring you the credible information. So find us, please.
I'm sorry, can I add something? I think, oh gosh, I hope I don't get shot here for saying this, but I think a lot of it also has to do with what the consumers want. Because I think media has certainly evolved and changed because of the technology, right? So once you could get your information online, and once consumers, readers, surfers, viewers were given the power to choose what news they consumed and when they consumed it versus someone in a television newsroom producing the 6 o'clock news and telling you what stories were important for that day, the order of importance, how long they were going to spend on each story. Once you got the opportunity to choose, well, I'm going to read this story and not this story, and I'm going to watch this story and not this story. Same with the newspaper. And I worked in newspapers, I worked in television. So we were the ones who made the decision, we think this is what you guys need to know today. And you read it, you watched it, you've listened to it on the radio, you read it in your magazine, and that's what it was. But when you go online now, whether before social media even, you are given the opportunity to choose. I'm interested in this story and not that story. And when you're online, especially in the early days, I remember seeing the very first ticker, so to speak, that came out that said, here are the top stories online today. And you knew that you had this incredible investigation into some entity or some business. You knew that something had just happened overseas with our military forces. You knew that something was happening in Washington. But the number one story was Anna Nicole Smith or Paris Hilton, because that's what everyone was choosing to read about or choosing to watch. That makes it very challenging for I think the journalists, the decision makers, and quite frankly the advertisers and the companies to say, well, gosh, if we're seeing that people are more interested in Paris Hilton than they are the uncovering of some big scandal or something within our community, what does that say about how we're going to spend our dollars? So I think that's the first thing, is kind of seeing what consumers are interested in. And when you see something like that, it can be a little disheartening. Yeah. But I also think, secondly, it's also about consumers taking the responsibility to figure out what are those credible sources. I mean, how many times have we gotten something on our social media feeds, or we've seen something online, or we've read about something, and then it turns out it wasn't true. And that was because someone picked it up and read it and shared it, and someone also read it, picked it up and shared it, but no one bothered to check the source. And I think that can happen a lot with user-generated content. We see that a lot in disaster times when there are like wildfires in California, and media outlets are inviting people, please send us your pictures, your video of what you're seeing right now, and people send it in, but no one bothers to check. Did that really come from today's fire? Did that really come from today, from someone in our viewing area, or is that from another part of the country from another year? And then it comes out maybe that wasn't a true and genuine photo that reflects what's really going on right now. So I think there's some of that responsibility there as well. And thirdly, I think that there's a lot of pressure on journalists nowadays because of social media, which is, I guess, both good and bad, to not only have it on first, but to get a number of likes, to get a number of engagement, because that is what also drives up interest from advertisers to pay their money to advertise or to have spots on your station, on your radio station, in your paper, or what have you. And when journalists are under that pressure, unfortunately, I think we've seen times when they haven't done the due diligence that they would normally have done had they had the time to really stop and think, and they weren't under the pressure, or their bosses weren't under that pressure, or their companies weren't under that pressure. I'm not saying that it's not something that we still shouldn't hold within ourselves. I mean, that's certainly a responsibility every journalist should take very seriously, but I remember when I was covering sports, a credible news source in my community, an investigative reporter in my community at a different station, reported on Twitter that a beloved and legendary pro football player had died. And everyone picked it up. Networks, ESPN, other media outlets in our market, and we did not, because I called my sources and we could not confirm that he had died, because he didn't. He was still alive. But, a couple hours later, when they went to make that correction, it was too late by then. It was almost, oh, by the way, we kind of messed up on that. He's still alive. Unfortunately, we didn't go out with that. But, our news station didn't get the credit for not going out with false information. Instead, the other news station just got the attention for going out with it, but no one really talked about the fact that he hadn't died yet. And, unfortunately, that gentleman passed away a few days later. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, which is, yes, I think all news entities and companies, even when you're talking about PR, have the responsibility of being ethical and truthful and report, I want to say the facts, and then letting the viewer, reader, surfer decide, what they believe. But I also think it's the responsibility of every single one of us who consume information to really figure out who and what we think is credible. And then even do our checking even then, because everyone can make mistakes, especially in this day and age of 24-hour, hit the send button and it automatically posts. Sorry.
And I'll just add, from a marketing perspective, major advertisers still trust credible sources as well, news sources. So they will pay to be online on News4Jax or FirstCoastNews.com. And especially since, like she said, viewers have the authority to choose what stories matter to them, there's targeted marketing. So if there are keywords in that article, then advertisers can match what they're selling to what that person is looking for in content on these websites. So there's still a huge arena for advertisers to spend money on news websites.
My way of looking at this is that media is an extension of education. And that when you are teaching in a high school or a college, you don't ask the audience what they want to learn. You tell them what they need to know.
Yeah.
So using the audience as the source of your news is wrong. You need to say, this is what is true. This is what is credible. You cannot be so worried about criticism from the other side of a story that you try to be fair when you expose something that's patently false. Okay? I'm a physician. Every time I see an article about immunizations, the article always recites the same article that was written years ago saying that immunizations might cause autism. Okay? It doesn't. It should never be used. It should never be quoted again. Okay? I'm critical of media. I love media, but I'm critical of it when we are seduced by the headline, and I think that was mentioned, because the headline doesn't go into it in depth. Times Union does a wonderful job, but after the investigative report, you don't see the follow-up. And today there was, on Morning Roundup on public radio, there was a criticism that, oh yeah, you wrote about Eureka Gardens many times, but you never got in there to see what was wrong. Okay? Of course, the biggest failure of the media has been the Iraq War. It's not, you can't do that. You're educators. And you have to tell what the public needs to know, not what they want to know. I don't care about, whatever it is. So anyhow, and the other thing is the advertising. Every night we watch the news from roughly 5 o'clock until 6:30. And the advertisements for all those phony medications that make sure that you are sexually potent or that you don't wet your pants, and have homeopathic doses of medication. That's bad, and it reflects on the television station. When you have a bad advertising, which is wrong, it reflects on your program. I don't know why that always happens at 6 o'clock. I don't watch television at 2 in the afternoon, but I don't know if those same ads are going on at 2 in the afternoon. So, as much as I love media, we were talking about how many papers we read a day and so on. It's important to be teachers. And we were talking about that a little while ago, Marsha. You have to give the public not what they want, but what they need.
Let me agree with you. I don't mean to cut you off, but I agree with you that we do need to be teachers. But you know what? We do that every day. First of all, Channel 4 is on from 5 to 7. You need to watch for the full 2 hours. not just an hour and a half. But we do that every day, and I'm sure Mary does the same thing in their news meetings. And that is what we think you're interested in. We cover that, and then we cover stories that you need to know, that you probably don't want to know, don't really care about, but you need to know this, like the expose the Times Union did on pension and pension reform. I don't really care, but I needed to know that. We all needed to know that, how our money is being spent. So we do that. We do teach, not the entire newscast, not the entire newspaper, but we do teach, and we do try to give you what we think you're interested in.
Well, even NBC News, the last piece is always about some dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some animal story. But
People love animals.
yeah.
They do. You're right.
They do.
But you need not only the first report, but the follow-up report, and it's amazing that Seymour Hersh's discussion about Benghazi didn't appear until the New York Times Magazine section just a week or 2 ago.
So I agree with you. The follow-ups are so important. And it goes really to one of the questions that was asked before. We don't have as many resources as we once did. And so we are constantly trying to determine how best to use those. And I think we are doing a better job of, especially once we have exposed something, continue to follow it to a certain degree. So pension is probably one of our best examples of that. Obviously, we have continued to watch that. There's still not a funding source for the unfunded liability. That affects every person who lives in this community because you aren't getting access to something, whether it's a library or a park or something, or the public safety that you need because of the unfunded liability. Not putting blame on anyone, just saying there needs to be an answer. So we look at that. Eureka Gardens is a very good example, sir, that you mentioned, and I completely agree with you. There are so many times, we get so many tips every time we do a story where we expose something, somebody else sends us in some wrongdoing that they believe has happened, and sometimes they're right. And so we have to determine which we have the time and the ability to go after, because we can't go after them all. And sometimes we can't go as deep as we want or do as many follow-ups. Eureka Garden is an incredible example. We have been there before. We've written many stories about Eureka Garden. We've written about individual crimes, but we have written about the problems in depth over the years. But we don't do it every year. We don't go back every 6 months and say, did you do what you said you would do? We do it to a certain level, and then we get busy with a lot of other things, and we stop because something else really big has happened or something else that we're hearing about. So it is a constant weighing of our needs and what we have to do, and we try to do the best that we can. We are following Eureka Garden, as you've been watching and reading, as the local television stations have as well. and we don't plan to stop anytime soon. We try to put our resources into what is most important. We will be bringing you the stories about the dogs. We're going to tell you the really good news about what's happening in our community as well. And everyone wants a mix. So I am very similar to you, where I want some of those meatier, newsier stories. But I love a great read about somebody who did something very inspiring. And we have a lot of people in our community who do those kinds of things. So we're trying to bring you a nice mix so that it's something that we're going to give everyone a little something when they pick up the paper that day or when they go to jacksonville.com. But we're constantly trying to do better and to do more. But it is, when we cover this, we aren't covering this. Or when we put more of our resources into this, we put fewer of them into this. It is just, we have a limited number of resources and what we can do.
My question is, I just would like to hear from each of you when we talk about social media and we talk about storytelling. How do we then differentiate between social media and professionalism when you, for instance, are creating a Facebook page on yourself that you can't cross that line between being too social and still being professional? It seems like there's a bleed over right now between how much of yourself you put out there because you're trying to create a relationship and tell a story, but then how do you also rein it in?
Yeah.
I think we've been doing that for years. I think when I think of television, people especially, I think that often they're going to speak in public, and you've been building those relationships forever. Print, we're a little different. Maybe we haven't been doing it as much, but I think we do it like we do anything else. When we go to a cocktail party, I don't talk about my opinions about who should be the mayor or who should be the president or whatever. That's not my job. My job is to tell you the facts, and so I don't take that hat off when I go home at night or on the weekends. I try to keep it to where it needs to be all the time. So I haven't seen a conflict of that. There are occasions that I have seen journalists who maybe have crossed a line, but quite frankly, they probably have crossed lines at parties. We're just now seeing it in writing, and it's always a good lesson for everyone to remember. Once it's out there, it's always out there, and you're never going to be able to take it back. So I think we should be professional whether or not you are recording us, if we write it down, or if we were standing, in a room someplace chatting. We should always be professional.
I think it's important. It's not just important for professionals who are already in the working world, but also for the students out there. Your social media accounts, we check those. When you apply for an internship with us or you want to come work with us, we check those. And there have been times when some candidates have been passed aside because of some of the stuff we've seen on your social media pages. So, I think it's important to make sure that your social media and just how you also carry yourself, whether it's, like you said, in person, whether you're at a party, whether you're at a forum like this or in an interview, that you're connecting yourself in a way that you feel is a true reflection of your work and of your character, of your value, and just make sure that you just keep that in mind all the time.
I've seen it across the board. I know some news anchors who have a disclaimer that these opinions are theirs and don't reflect their station. And also as a personality, because that's kind of where the industry is trending a lot more. There are reporters and anchors who are more personalities and can say things that they're passionate about that are more personal. So I think it depends on your industry, definitely who you work for as well. But I think there's always a line of professionalism, and there's always a little bit TMI for each person. So I think it's something that, for instance, for myself, I'm representing my clients as well. So I tend to, if there's a personal connection that I have to my clients, I'll highlight those things. But if it's just a random something that I don't want to disclose about myself, I think I have a measure of what's too much and what's, just enough.
My Facebook page, I'm always trying to inform. So what I post about myself. For example, I was at the Cure Search Walk I may give you a link on my Facebook page to statistics about childhood cancer. Just a link for give you more information, and I'll also post a picture of me at the Cure Search Walk. And it's always driving you to come back to Channel 4 for more on my Channel 4 Facebook page. On my personal Facebook page, I just inform you of different activities going on in the community that I may be involved in, may not be involved in, but it's always on a professional basis. I just don't do it. I just don't put things on there that I think will hurt me or it's immoral. I still have a morality clause in my contract, so I don't do that. And for the young people out there posting on Facebook, if you don't want mama to see it, don't put it on there. You know, keep your clothes on, those type of things.
Yeah.
but my Facebook page, I try to inform.
I think it's also a safety issue. When I was on camera working as a reporter, I was very careful about what I posted and how I posted. The station wanted us to use our social media, especially Facebook, as a way to kind of promote stories we were working on, or coverage we were going to have, or what have you. Especially as a woman, you know, I would also would inform some overzealous fans where I was going to be and when to show up to try to see me, or you know, and that kind of thing can be kind of scary. So I think you have to kind of keep all of those kinds of things in mind, not just your professional persona and how you're, you know, and how you're presenting yourself, but also, you know, think about your safety, stuff like that.
And I just say it's important to be strategic because remember, every word that you post on social media, it goes into search engine optimization. So if you go into Google and type in your name, you'll see your posts for, you know, a long time. And so if you post about something that you don't want to be remembered, it can always pop up in a Google search.
I wanted to go back to the question that the managing editor at the Times Union raised, and I was writing down some notes as you were speaking in terms of the balancing act that, you know, the staff tries to make when it comes to those stories they should try to continue when they're kind of coming across the wire. And it left me with the question that where do we go as the public in trying to get this question or get this answer or get this scandal resolved? I make note of the pension fund that I think the Times Union has done an excellent job in terms of looking into that problem that happened for 12 years. And it even covered again the neglect, if you will, of elected officials and not having that kind of oversight and looking into it. I also transmitted those feelings to what it does to the taxpayers, because the taxpayers are funding that particular scandal, if you will. And I made some other notes when it came to not only the Eureka Gardens and stuff. So the question that I was having again is that what do we do when that kind of those conflicts comes up where you don't have those resources because the public is looking for some resolution when it comes to what's going to go on when it comes to their taxes, whether or not it comes to, again, their health considerations that the physician just made. Where do we go in getting some resolution to make us feel better that the fourth estate is actually the institution that makes us feel safe with our taxes and as citizens? That's the first thing that I came up with. And the very last one was, it seems as though over the years, investigative reporting has just diminished under the emboldenment, if you will, of politicians. Is that we read articles against where a report may have brought the attention to something about something that's going on, and there's never any resolution. It seems as politicians may say, well, we have no comment. A private industry say, we have no comment. And then the story just politely goes away. And there are those of us that say, boy, you know, Channel 4 did an excellent job, ABC News did an excellent job, the Times Union did an excellent job. But what happens next when it comes to our citizenship and looking again to the media for protecting us?
Well, I'll start with that one, if you'd like. I think we can't force politicians to take action. We can shine the light, we can put the words out there, we can tell it, we can keep finding new things, which pension is a really good example because that is something where we just have kept on it and we've seen change. We saw where it was all done behind closed doors, and then it wasn't. And we saw where we were able to put a spotlight on some of the questionable practices, and now there are people who are looking into those as well. I think we have to be as persistent as we can with the resources that we have. I think when the public reacts to what the media does, when you let your voices be heard, that could be through emails, through phone calls. When you watch something on the television news, when you read something in the paper or online, and it causes you concern, I think responding to that and letting your elected officials know that you have a concern is just a fundamental way to go about it. They listen. They may not listen to us if they think nobody else is going to pay attention to it, but they're going to listen to you because you're voting for them or not. So I think people's voices are really powerful. And I know that to be the case because I'm seeing the reaction. So recently we read about the fact that lobbyists were, during a council meeting, texting council members to try to influence their votes and get them to change. And there was a change. The problem wasn't that there was texting between lobbyists and council members. The problem was that there was communication, it appeared, between council members through lobbyists. And that's not allowed under our sunshine laws here in Florida. Immediately, the council president took action. It didn't take him very long. It was about a week. We just, within this last month, wrote about some scripting issues at JEA, which is where most of you get your light and water, and you pay a bill every month. Well, there were board members who have always voted the way that the CEO, their employee, has really wanted them to vote, other than one time in the last 2 years we could find. One time we could find where there was not a unanimous vote. Within a very short time, a week or so, there is almost a whole new board about to be placed. There are 2 people still sitting on that board because the mayor took action. I think that's because those politicians are seeing what we're doing, and they're hearing back from you. They know that it's causing you concern, and so they're reacting to that. So I think I think that's how you do that. It goes to your first question, which was how do we still get the news out there when there's a problem? You tell us, but you tell your elected officials. You keep talking. You just have to keep at it. Sometimes it's a different way that you present the news tip, a different time that you might present it, with different facts can change it. Sometimes just a different reporter can see it in a different way, and that's that time when they know just enough of other information to kind of piece it all together and they're able to tell that story. I think being here and hearing this and understanding that I have dozens of journalists upstairs in that room over there who are working today and every day trying to get to the bottom of things. There are just only so many of them. And so we just keep plugging away, and we take your comments very seriously. It's where we're getting our tips. I mean, how do you think we knew there was a script at JEA to even look for? Or how did that we knew that there were texts, or that we were able to look at special pension funds for the police and fire pension? We didn't know it until someone told us. And it's often someone in the community.
I would add that pitching is important, like she said, and using the benefit of social media to research different reporters, because you can kind of see what they care about. And then you can actually reach out to them on social media as well. And just finding that connection between you and that reporter to see, to kind of guide that story, like she said, and refine your pitch.
And just to emphasize one other thing she said, and that is, usually if the politician knows that people care, they will take action. In other words, I may ask a question, they may say no comment to me, until I say, we've been getting calls from so many viewers about this. What about this? and they generally will respond. But again, it's up to you. Call, email.
I have a question for the managing editor in the Florida Times Union. And by the way, my name is Chanshik Lee, and I'm teaching PR at UNF, and I'm also teaching emerging media. And now that everyone seems to be talking about the social media, I'd like to ask you how the Florida Times Union use and utilize social media. Do you see the social media as you're losing money to social media, or are you gaining audience through social media? How you view the social media? As your expenditure, or you're gaining money from social media? The reason why I'm asking this one is, although I'm champion like a new media technology, because I'm teaching that, but I truly believe that there are some misconceptions that people believe social media changed the whole media landscape, but I believe it's not. Because when it comes to who actually create the great stories that has significant impact on our society, but still New York Times, Washington Post, WJTX, WJCT, and Channel 4, and the Florida Times Union, we still get a lot of great stories from traditional media companies. But the only thing changed was the people just watch and read the same stories in different outlets, which is social media. So my question is, are we just staying in here losing money to social media, or are we doing something about it?
Well, I think that the revenue question is just very complex. We are competing with many other entities for revenue. So it is not just social media by any means that advertisers are turning to, and I think that that's something that my colleagues up here could certainly address maybe a little bit more on where the money is going. But I will say this: I think social media is another tool for us to get our message out there. I don't see it as competition. I agree that we have the original news sources are the places where you've always been getting your news. That's where you're going to talk about it. And that's where you're sharing your information. That's where you're sharing our stories, and then you're having the conversations about what you think about those stories and what's in them. Social media provides us incredible news tips. We get a lot of information from social media. It's not, we obviously make sure that we can verify what we're using. So it has been useful. It is also a way to brand ourselves. It's a way to get our stories into the hands of people who may otherwise not see them. Not everybody gets the newspaper on their front door. Not everyone is a member of Jacksonville.com, though I would encourage you please to do both of those things. But now we are able to get our news out in front of other people, and then you are able to share it with your family and friends and other states and countries, and it certainly keeps expanding from there. So I don't see it as competition. It's a tool, and it's how we use it, and we're just constantly learning how to use it the best way.
My name's Philip, and I'm on the side of the marketing communication side. I've got about 15 years of experience, and in the interest of learning, I just wanted to comment on a couple things that maybe help you. One question as well. The first thing is you had mentioned particularly about the business of media. So a lot of what we're talking about right now is the content providing and the format that it's presented in. But to hire all the dozens of reporters and everyone that's upstairs, it takes a lot of money to do that, especially if you want great people. So the advertising, which would be my responsibility, or as a marketer, my job is to place advertising where I get the best audience that's potentially going to react or respond or purchase that particular product or service. So as a marketer, that's my job. As a PR professional, and especially an ethical one or a moral one, you need to get awareness for your client in what we all strive is for great credible news sources. Well, great credible news sources hire the best people, and they have to pay them salaries. So the business and media, there's two sides to it. And I feel as though the best relationships are those that you cultivate with the media. And I say media is in many different formats nowadays. You know, I mean, it was print, and now it's television, broadcast, radio, internet. The internet has a whole bunch of different scopes, bloggers. As you go into the communications field years from now, you're going to see, I think it's going to continue to change and modify and how news changes. One of the biggest areas of growth right now in companies is content strategists. So not only do they have a PR person and they have a marketing team, but they have a whole team of people that just are designing the strategies to develop content like Disney does and tell those stories. But they modify and tweak those stories for each medium that it's going out to, right? Twitter, 140 characters, which they might change. Facebook now shows video. So that same story has to be modified. So as students, I think you're going to continue to see changes as the way these stories are told. The final comment, and it's more a question for the media, and this relates to the students. About a month ago, we had that horrible tragedy at the school campus in, I want to say, Washington or Oregon. And what I saw for the first time over many years was they did bring light to the national news channels trying to get information from potential victims and students that were still trapped on campus while the active shooter was still there and the SWAT teams were still trying to make sure the area was secure. Many of them, these news reporters or investigative reporters, would tweet to individual account, please connect with me so I can instant message you. I hope you're okay, be safe, but as soon as you have a moment, can you please call me to tell me what's going on? So my question is, there's definitely an ethical line there. I understand the reporter's side because they're trying to get information, but when does it cross that line? So that would be my question to you. And I think that's a hard one, but it is relevant to the students here. God forbid there was ever a situation like that. But I think that ethical line is something that all of us on both sides of the fence need to be cognizant of. And again, it still comes back to that line of what is that great source of information and is the information accurate? So, thank you.
And the gentleman in front of him also has put his hand up a couple times, so I want to make sure that he also gets that after. As far as the ethics, you know, that obviously wasn't here, and that's not something that we've done in that way. I think our job is to make sure that people understand that we're available to talk when they want to talk. I mean, we do knock on people's doors. We call people at the worst times. And I remember very early in my career as a journalist, I had somebody who knew me really well was like, how can you do that? Like, how can you go to someone's house and ask them those questions at the worst time? And I thought to myself, you know, there are times that somebody will say, oh, I just don't want to speak. And I'm the first to say, okay, here's my card. Let me know later on if you want to. But what I found was it wasn't for me to make a judgment on when someone else was going to want to talk. There were oftentimes people just didn't know they had that option, that they didn't know that we cared enough to tell their story, whether that is the parent of someone who did something horrendous, you know, somebody who is a shooter, somebody who is a victim, and they want to tell the story of the person that they lost. For just as many times as someone didn't want to talk, they did. And so I think it was our job to just make ourselves available. I'm not comfortable in the middle of a shooting, reaching out at that moment. That feels too soon for me. So I don't think that I'd feel comfortable with that. I think, again, just putting ourselves out there, letting people know that we're available, and then at the appropriate time saying something. The question is, when is the appropriate time? And we certainly do reach out very soon after a tragedy. And what we have found is often people want to speak. I mean, they do. I think that it is actually, I think it sometimes makes them feel a bit better when they can get their story out there. So, and sharing that obviously can change loss. You know, it can shine a lot of light on things that are wrong in our society.
You asked about crossing a line. I think the line continues to move. Over the years, it just continues to move. Because a few years ago, you wouldn't think of doing something like that, doing an active shooting. tweeting someone, calling someone, asking for information. You just wouldn't think to do that. So the line has sort of moved as we've gone. I can tell you now that is just one of the worst things I enjoyed about this job, and that is talking to someone after they've lost someone. I hate doing that, but I get paid to do it. So I do it, but I just hate doing that. But like Mary said, there are so many people who want to talk. They want to tell their story. And it's up to you to just ask. You have to ask. If you don't ask, you'll never know. Yeah.
I think there's I was trained in ethics in my journalism classes, but then there's also a personal measure that I have with me. I do freelance field production for ABC News, and the most recent story I did was when the reporters were shot on air and killed. The woman they were interviewing, her daughter lived in St. Augustine, so ABC contracted me to go down and knock on their door and try to get them to talk. And they have, what they're allowed to do, I'm not quite sure, but they were telling me different things I can offer to get them comfortable to do that. I took a fruit basket, and then I kind of just had to have a moment to myself and because I desired to be genuine with that person. And so the way I presented it was, there's going to be a lot of media coming at you, and I can be a strategist and help you sort through that. I can help you feel comfortable and know who to trust as they come at you. And I can tell you that Good Morning America is trusted and, kind of speak highly of them. So I just think it's a balance. It always is.
My name's Dave Bruderly. I'm relatively new to the community, having moved here about 5 years ago from Gainesville. And I'm an engineer, and like my friend here, the doctor, I want to kind of circle back to this business and how do you educate the public? I spent most of my career business to business working in the field of environmental analysis, cleanup, remediation, and the last 25 years, prevention of pollution. And I knew, as a young engineer scientist 40 years ago, that non-point source pollution of the St. Johns River and other lakes in Florida, waters in Florida, was a huge problem. It's still a huge problem because nobody figured out how to communicate to the general public the facts and the scientific methods behind interpreting the facts. I figured out 25 years ago that greenhouse gas pollution was a serious existential threat to the future of our climate. And here we are 25 years later, half the public doesn't even want to talk about it, not to mention our politicians. So and you mentioned gun violence, and we report every day on somebody getting shot. I kind of think there needs to be some repetition here of some fundamental facts when you're reporting the crisis of the moment. Maybe there should be a register that says this is a 17,522 murder in the United States in the past 12 months or something like that. I ran for Congress in 2002, and when I stepped out of my comfort zone as an engineer professional and started talking to my communications advisors, mostly from UF, I was told I had to speak at an 8th grade level. I had to dumb it down. And I had to repeat it 7 times if I wanted to get my message across to a voter to influence him to vote for me. And that's pretty damn hard to do when you're dealing with issues like climate change, non-point source water pollution, medications. When your message is being countered by an avalanche of corporate-sponsored advertising, that's driving something that's in somebody's short-term interest that may not be in the long-term interest of the community. Ogden Nash said something that I'm going to try to paraphrase, but he said, basically, if a man's income depends on not understanding something, he won't understand it. And that's the challenge that you all have in the news media, is trying to figure out how do you overcome that short-term vested interest to get out the very complicated long-term messages that people need to know about so that they can make better day-to-day decisions. Most folks at an 8th grade level can't even balance a checkbook, but they're being asked to vote on macroeconomic policy and free trade agreements and free markets and environmental policy and energy policy, whether or not we go to war, why are we going to war. People don't have a clue how the world really works. And this is tragic. And you guys, you're doing your best, but you've got to, we've got to come up with a better way of repeating the fundamental facts of economics, of physics. Conservation of energy, mass, and momentum is what drives the Earth's climate. It's not short-term return on investment for a multinational oil company. It's conservation of energy, mass, and momentum is what makes the weather work, what makes the climate work. People don't understand this stuff. Economics, macroeconomics. Adam Smith told us what the role of government is in a capitalist society. It's just like Jefferson told us how to work a democracy. And they did that in 1776. Yet we still have mercantilists out there who say, we believe in, quote, free markets, get the government off our back, and they don't understand that Social Security is a socialist program. It's crazy. So repetition, repetition, repetition of facts and basic interpretation of those facts with sound principles of science, finance, economics, engineering, etc. And thank you for the opportunity to interact with you.
Absolutely, thank you again for reading and for coming here today. It's the hardest thing we do. We repeat a lot of stories, and the idea is to not just tell you what happened today, but tell you why it happened, what happened 10, 20, 100 years ago. Put it all in context without boring you silly. The gentleman behind you earlier was talking about the cost behind all of this. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last few years just on fighting for access to information to tell you some of the stories that we've told you. Pension lawsuit, huge cost, our biggest cost. But we also had to fight to find teacher evaluation information from the state. We've had to fight to get access to court proceedings when it's come to some of our high-profile cases. We do it, and other than maybe the court cases where people do come in, the average reader and average viewer has great interest in that. I don't know that the pension coverage has sold a lot of papers for us, but we do it because we know it's important, and we aren't going to stop. So every day I can look and I can tell you who is on our website right now and what they're reading, and I can tell you that half of those things won't come near the front page when I sit down later today to determine what should be there. Because we're going to base it on what's most important, and we're just going to keep telling you what you need to know. Now, we're not going to be able to tell you every day. We have a limited amount of space, and we have a limited number of people who can share information every day. So we're trying to be smart in the way that we're using those resources and smart in the way that we're able to bring you new information that helps you get it. But I think part of it isn't like, do we keep saying it? But again, it goes back to the gentleman in the back earlier. How do you get somebody to do something about it? And that's where you all get involved and you have those conversations. And that's where the solutions are coming in. Whether it's the environment that we're talking about, if it's Veterans Affairs and getting people the access to care that they need, if it is improving our healthcare system, no matter what the issue that we're talking about, education is a very good example, the struggles of our education system here locally and across the country. We'll talk about them because that is absolutely what is most important, and we'll be constantly looking for the new angles and the new things that we can bring to it to help make a difference. But it is trying to find solutions, and that's not going to just happen in the media. That's going to happen with the community.
In terms of educating the public, though, on a day-to-day basis, some stories are very complex. If I were doing a story and I needed an engineer, I would go to you as my source to explain this. Then I can explain it. Sometimes things are so difficult, you need someone to help you understand it so that you can explain it. If you don't understand it, you can't explain it. If I needed to know about medicine, I would call you and talk to you, and then I would use that source and that information to explain to the viewer. I always say, explain it to me, and explain it to me like I'm a sixth grader. And you will find that that is very difficult to do. You have to be very well versed in any subject matter in order to explain it, to break it down and explain it to someone on an 8th grade level.
In marketing, we call someone like yourself a subject matter expert. And when I was trained in journalism, we were taught to have 3 sources. There's the subject, a witness, and then a subject matter expert to cover that story fully. I'd also take that point to advise the students that whatever your minor is or your other focuses are, you can learn a lot in that knowledge that you can bring to your reporting experience, because there will be a lot of times you have to cover city council meetings, which aren't as exciting. So as much as you can learn, take that with you and make notes. Even if you're not using it right now, down the line, that may be something that pops up and you'll be happy that you know about it.
All right, hello, my name is Robbie Weber, and I'm studying public relations at UNF. So just kind of relating back to like the trends in the industry, the state of the industry and media. With social media now, everybody sort of has a voice. So maybe especially for a brand or company like Disney, how do you deal with, how do you respond and react to maybe a negative criticism? Say you have a blogger who is an opposing view. How does that affect your day-to-day job and communication?
But I would say for the most part, Disney is pretty strategic when it comes to the messages that we share and how we share them. And everyone's certainly entitled to their opinion. We would love that we'd love for everyone to love Disney. And we would love for everyone to love Disney all the time. And if someone has an unfortunate experience or just didn't love it so much that particular day, I would like to think that if they reached out to our investor relations folks, they would handle it there. But it quite frankly is rare that Disney will engage in some kind of social media battle with someone who doesn't have I've never seen actually Disney engage in a social media battle with anyone or any entity that has a less than stellar review.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Crystal. And my question is, I've kind of been listening to what you all have been saying in regards to social media and balancing your social media pages both professionally and personally. Mm-hmm. I was also listening when she mentioned that, watching what the viewers want to see, and if you see, like she said, Anna Nicole Smith was trending, but you want to talk about like foreign policy. I was wondering if you thought that, what are your thoughts on if you think it would ever get to a point in a society that seems to be more interested in pop culture and what Kim and Chloe are wearing than the way they're running the VA for the veterans or ISIS or what's happening in Syria. Do you ever think that it will get to a place where your likability is more important than your credibility, and why?
I am confident in the public, in the community, that will not happen. That you might be interested in Anna Nicole Smith or Paris Hilton or whoever the star of the moment is. But I believe that you care and that the public will care about what's happening to its veterans, what's happening to its environment, what's happening to its taxpayer money. I think sometimes we all want to be entertained, but I go back to we're here to educate. That's what I think my role is to educate you. I think I'm fine giving you some entertainment, and I think that we all need that. I don't just read like science books at night. I like to also read for entertainment. I'm reading a Steve Jobs book right now, and I'm entertained, and but I'm also learning, and I think that's important. So I think you'll eat your vegetables when they're put there. You're just also looking forward to the dessert, and I get it. But we're going to give you all of it, and I'm just so confident that that's what you'll continue to be looking for, that we're just going to keep doing it because we know it is that important. Often you don't realize it is missing until it's just not there anymore. And there are communities where the media is pretty much gone. Often they're smaller communities. They might have had a small newspaper or a bigger paper, spent some time there, and they don't spend as much time now. And certainly I think that there are even small communities in our own in this region that we don't get as much time to spend there. And then something happens and we're all like, wow, didn't realize that was happening down the road, and now we're focusing our attention there. So I think that credibility will always be important.
And people get older, so what you care about and what the masses care about now, it will evolve as well. Because I know when I was a younger, fresh out of college student, I cared more about that kind of thing. But as I get older and I am in the millennial age, more millennials are starting their own businesses, and we want to see more quality stories as well.
Good morning. My name's Rose, and I love reading the news. I love following Florida Times and News4Jax. But lately, what I've noticed is that the news will take a story that people love seeing, like, not love seeing, but I guess are used to reading a lot. Like, for example, the crime on the north side of Jacksonville, or the hot carring stories that happened a lot during the summer, or police brutality now. And I feel like that I'm okay with the awareness, making me aware of what side of town not to go to or to be aware of or what's going on where. But I feel like we've covered so much of police brutality to where now we're putting the police in such a negative light to where the public doesn't even respect them anymore, to where it scares us citizens that if the majority of the people aren't respecting the authority, then where does that put our safety? So what I want to know is, what is the media doing to kind of comfort the inflicted and inflict the comfortable? I realize we're supposed to hold a mirror to society, but I feel like we're holding a negative mirror, or showing a negative light. So what is media doing to kind of help us out?
Yeah, our job really isn't to show a negative or a positive light. It is to tell you what is happening. And I think some of that, what you see, is based on a perception. I do agree that there are times people are reading about something that's happening, like police brutality, and then some people then start to distrust police more. It goes back to what I was saying before. I think there are many good stories, and I think we tell many of the positive things that are happening in the community. But I can't stop writing about the things that are happening simply because it seems like it's negative. Now, again, I think our job is to put it into context. And that takes time, and it takes money, and it's not something quick, and it's not something that we can do with every story. And so we try to stop. I mean, again, you're going to rarely see crime on the front page of the Times-Union unless we can unless we can explain it to you and put it all together. It goes to how many homicides were there in the country. Well, we can't do that as often, but we can tell you how many there are in our community. We can take a step back and we can look at police shootings, which we have done on occasion, and they don't happen that often here, but they certainly do happen. And as you know, they're happening around the rest of the country. And we sent a reporter to Ferguson last year, I guess it was, and because there was a question of how would our community deal with things. And so we look at what is happening here, and look at all of those factors and not just what that one thing is happening. Now, again, I think sometimes it's perception and it's what people read into it. And it's also when you're seeing it with social media and you're seeing other people's opinions, and it's not just what you heard on television or what you read in the paper, but then all of the opinions that go around it. Because I can't tell you how often somebody will say, well, you said, and I'll look at the story, which is nice because it's right there in print. And I can say, we didn't say that. You saw it or you heard it somewhere, but that's not what we said. So our job really is to put the facts out there, and then the best thing about our society is that you all get to debate it.
Yeah. Let me just add that it's a very difficult job about reporting what you're going to report, how you're going to report it. But in terms of reporting police shootings, reporting killings, my question to you is, Do you think if we stop reporting it, will it stop happening? It won't. It just won't. Is what I'm saying. You have to cover it, and like she said, sometimes you have to put it in context, but you have to cover it, and it's not putting police in a bad light. It's not putting a particular part of town in a bad light. It's what happened, and we report that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to send the wrong message.
No.
My point wasn't that we're putting the police in a negative light only. I'm saying, is there a way that we could put these people of authority in a positive light so that the public can trust them again, so that if they are called to a call of service or I am in danger, I'm not saying only report the negative, but do you guys feel like we need to report the positive as well to bring back that trust?
Just saw a story just the other day with a police officer who was helping a young kid who was lost, and that little kid was holding on to the officer. So, stories like that, we report it. It happened.
You were right.
You remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes.
Hey, my name is Lizzie Messer. I'm a PR major at UNF. I was wondering, I've noticed sometimes in the news that we report things that need to be reported, but sometimes we focus on it for months at a time. Like, for instance, the Malaysian Air flight, where it's very important, but I feel like sometimes we want to add new information to it, and it's not true in some cases. So we spin it and then romanticize it. So my question for y'all is, does 24-hour news help or hurt the content we receive as its viewers on its accuracy?
That's a good question. I'm just going to always tell you more information is better. I'm just a believer in that. We will continue following things, and we'll give you some of, as new developments are happening. We don't have a lot of space in the paper, and we certainly don't have a lot of resources to devote a lot of space continuously every day. I think Rob might want to kind of chime in on the television side of things, but I don't mind giving you new information, but I want it to be new. I want, when we're reporting the next day story, and whether it's local or we're bringing you wire reports, I want it to be the new information, because again, we only have so much, so only so much space. I want to use it where where you're learning new things every day.
I think the 24-hour news cycle, though, makes you work harder. I can tell you that, because we will tell you now 12 people were injured in a plane crash. Well, after that, maybe it turns out 14 people were injured. Well, now we have to come back and update that. It's sometimes situations are fluid in a 24-hour news cycle. They're always very fluid. So you have to work harder to bring the information to you, accurate information to you, and to keep up with it. And like she said, you always want to bring something new. You hate to keep reporting the same thing over and over and over again. You should have something new every time you come on.
The woman in the front. Okay, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm Annie from UNF. I was wondering if there's any new trends besides social media y'all like to touch on.
Trying to think what we haven't touched on.
Well, I can tell you for public relations, the gentleman touched on it briefly, what they're now calling content strategy, which I think I've always just called storytelling. But it's a new buzzword, basically. So content strategy, branded content, branded journalism, all of a sudden it's new, but to me it's just another way of telling stories. And I think now that media and all levels of media have had to adjust to multimedia ways of storytelling. Like, just because your paycheck comes from a television station doesn't mean that you're not also going to be asked to write an article that'll appear online. Or just because your paycheck comes from a magazine doesn't mean you're not also going to be asked to take your own photos or to shoot your own video. So as that has evolved in news organizations, that is also evolving, I think, on a public relations side, to where companies aren't just going to push out their information to the media and ask you guys, hey, will you do stories on it? Companies are also creating their own newsrooms so that they can push out their own videos. They have their own YouTube channels. They have their own stories being done. I know for Disney, we have for years always prepared raw B-roll and gotten sound bites, as well as press materials like press releases and fact sheets and quote sheets and things like that we share with the media to help them do their stories. But we're also telling our own stories on the Disney Parks blog. We also have Instagram accounts and Snapchats and Tumblr and Pinterest, and we're also being our own multimedia newsroom, sharing our stories so that we're not waiting for media to cover us or even for our guests to come and experience. We're also covering ourselves in a way that we would hope that media and guests would do it as well. So I think this branded content, branded journalism, content strategy, that's just the new buzzword terms, I think, in the industry for steps that have been taken for quite a while now.
That's a really good point, and I'll to kind of spin off that, because everyone's doing that, so it's not just businesses, but governments are now telling their own stories.
Teams, like sports teams, things like that.
Absolutely. It's actually, I think we're having a little bit more difficulty getting people to respond to us sometimes, because often people want to just tell their story direct, and I get that. And if you're a business and that's what you want to do, and certainly we can't force people to talk to us, but when you're a government agency, and I'll use like the sheriff's office in this area, they would love, and they do, they tell their own stories. They have their own videos. They'll put out their press releases. They're putting it on social media. But that means sometimes they think they don't have to respond to us. They do. Yeah, because, y'all pay their salaries. And so it's difficult, and it has become more difficult. And our job is to just not stop asking, and we get the information through public records. We get sources to tip us to things. It just makes it more difficult. But we're really, really confident that it is our job. We understand this is what we need to do, and we just keep doing it. So I love that businesses and others can just directly tell the public what they want to tell them. I just also want to make sure that people are responding to us so that we can ask the questions, that we can, hold people accountable. And often we can get that from many, but there are some places out there, including some businesses, where they just kind of think, okay, so I don't need the media. They may not need us to share their story, but to respond to our questions. Which are your questions? We still need to do that.
I would say experiential marketing, which is capturing that whole experience for someone. Being able to put on an event, create a social media campaign that you can talk about on television media. That's kind of what I do with my clients. So if they have an initiative that they want to get out, we come up with a hashtag, we come up with a social strategy for it, and then we tie it into a contest maybe where we announce a winner on the morning news show. So being able to provide that whole experience, and then video. In my pitches now to television stations, I include video because it's quick. You tell the whole story. They know that you have B-roll or something visual that they can show, so they don't necessarily have to send a reporter or photographer out. So video and just capturing that whole experience.
And about the branded content strategy, I have a question. I think branded entertainment, branded content is a great way to get publicity if you use the owned media, such as social media. But when you use the branded content in traditional media, like for the Times Union, Washington Post, even Atlantic, they use branded content once for experimentally. But in that case, things get weird. I mean, not weird. It's very ethically problematic.
Oh, I think that I've seen one of the stories that I've written and created for Walt Disney World Resort have been picked up by traditional, or I call legacy media outlets, but it's been labeled sponsored content, branded content, or advertorial, or however they want to name it. But there's also been times when a story I've written has just been cut and pasted and put on a newspaper's website as their own. But that's a discussion that you had to have with that newsroom. Obviously as a publicist, I'm delighted that that happened. They didn't change a word of it. As a journalist in that newsroom, I probably would have stood up and screamed about it. But I also know the realities of newsrooms where I used to work and friends that I make now on this side of of the line here, and they're just being forced to do more with less. And so there are times when newsrooms I know that would have never even used B-roll that we've shot and dropped those shots into their own packages. They would never have done it. And now, as she was saying, they will take an entire story we've done and just run it as a VO on their newscast. So I think those are the conversations that I guess individual newsrooms really have to have, don't you think?
Yeah, we have to label them. I'm not at all comfortable. We use contributed stuff all the time. Without a doubt, I have absolutely no problems. And you're right, we label it as sponsored or advertorial. We use both of those things, those terms. We've contributed by, and that's common because we can't send a reporter everywhere, but we have to be clear when it is an unbiased, independent journalist who is providing that information, or when it's someone who is not. And that doesn't mean that they, and in many cases, there are former journalists who are working in organizations and writing them very similar to the way that they would have done, before. But they still have a boss, and that boss gets to read their stuff, and there's an agenda or a motive sometimes behind it. And again, it doesn't mean that it will always change what the story would be. But our job is to let you know that we can't vouch for all of that, and therefore we're going to tell you that it's been contributed. We think you're interested in it, so it's on our website or it's in our paper. A very good example would be some of our health news. We'll often have doctors who will contribute. It's just direct from them to you, and I think that's important, and I think that it's added value that we provide to you, and I think many people enjoy it. We just need to let you know that it came from Mayo or St. Vincent's or Baptist or whomever it came from.
For legal and ethical reasons.
For ethical is the main absolute reasons. Yes.
I am a senior at UNF in the Department of Communication, and so for those of us that are graduating, within the next, hopefully, couple semesters, what do you expect from us, applying for these jobs and having all of these internships under our belt and carrying our AP style book like our Bible, and what do you expect us to have and to contribute to you guys, besides a really good, AP mindset?
Social media is very important in television. Like I said, we have people, that's all they deal with is our website. And so if you're able to write to a website, tweet, Facebook page, manage a Facebook page, if you know what is involved in that, those kinds of things, you're expected to do that and go out and report as well. So it's just that they're getting more out of people than just one job. You have to be able to do a multitude of things. As a matter of fact, we've gone back, when I first started in the business, you had to go out and shoot your own story, and you had to write it, and you do everything yourself. One-man band is what we would call it. We've come back to that. They're now hiring people who can do that. Who can shoot their own stories, write their own stories, and edit their own stories. You might have to do it every day, but you have to be able to do that. It's a great selling point for you if you can do that, as well as write to social media.
Yeah, I would say writing in general too. Editing is key. I think that was one of the first things I learned job shadowing at Channel 4 when I was in high school. Editing and being able, we had a term KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So again, being able to speak and write conversationally. And I'll also say once you're there, just take every opportunity to learn and to ask questions, also to kind of offer something that they haven't thought about, be constantly thinking of new ideas and pitching those and refining your pitches, just being present and listening and knowing where and when you can contribute.
I want you to be good writers. I want you to have basics of grammar. AP is something that you can still learn along the way. It was my Bible back in college too, I certainly remember, but it's something that you'll learn what you need. We want you to be versatile, definitely what has just been said here. And then there's just a fundamental, I want you to know the difference between right and wrong. I want you to have a good moral compass, because I can't teach that. as easily, and it's really important. Good communication skills, that's when you're dealing with other people outside, but it's when you're talking to your bosses so that we know what's happening, and we can help you when you're having difficulty. It just, nothing takes the place of good old-fashioned communication skills. Needed it back in my day, still need it today. But I think the good judgment is something that you'll learn along the way. But again, I can't teach you the difference between right and wrong. I just want you to come in and I want you to have good, strong ethics and a really good work ethic. I need you to be, really willing to get out there and do your best, because we've talked about not having as many resources, and so it is really important that you are able to give it your all when we hire you, because every hire, I'm sure it was always this way, but it just seems hard to believe, because I remember a day when I'm thinking, gosh, I would have loved to have been the managing editor 10 years ago when there was just so many stories, and I think, they never had to worry about what they were going to put in the paper the next day. There aren't as many people, and so every time I make a hire, I am just so careful, because I want good people who work well with each other. And that might sound really, really silly, but it goes back to the social media stuff. I won't hire people who have questionable issues on social media. And I've actually stopped looking at somebody when I started looking and said, okay, I'm going to be spending too much time with this person dealing with things that are outside of even the work world. So I don't know that I want to be dealing with that. So those are all really important. And I sound like your mom. I know, I get it. But I gotta hire you, so you kind of have to do it.
I think it's definitely such a good point. I think there's a misconception that these jobs that we have are glamorous. It's a job. The glamour part, even when I was working in television, the glamour part was maybe 5% of my job. I was on TV maybe 5% of my day, because the rest of the day, I was chasing down stories, I was chasing down information, I was feverishly writing, I was putting together videos, I was making phone calls. Same thing in public relations world. 5% of my day or my time is spent out in the parks, hosting media, doing these large press events, traveling here and there to court media to come and just inform them of what's going on. But most of my time, I'm in meetings and conference calls and meetings and conference calls. And by the way, did I tell you there are meetings and conference calls? And I'm tracking down information. I'm talking with partners. Can we do this? Can we do that? What can we share? What can't we share? How am I going to get that picture done? Who's going to take it? Where can we get approvals? Did someone talk to Burbank? I'm on the phone till 10 o'clock at night sometimes, because we're dealing with Shanghai, and that's when it's 8 o'clock in the morning there when we're starting the call, but it's 8 o'clock at night for us here. So it is work. It is work. If you're looking for something glamorous, then go get an agent or become a model, and even that is work. Even acting is work, right? So it is work. If you're going to go into journalism, if you're going to go into branded journalism, if you're going to be a marketer, if you're going to be public relations, it is work. And I'm not saying that we don't have incredible, amazing, fun times where I'm standing in the middle of something, doing something, and thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I get paid to witness this, or to be a part of this, or to help facilitate stories about this. Of course, even as a journalist, I did the same thing, like, oh my gosh, I'm a witness in history, I'm getting paid for it, holy crap. But it is work. It is work. And it's not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You might miss a party. You might not be able to make that movie. Your holiday, you might have to work through a holiday, but it is work. And this is what this industry is. So knowing that and having that understanding when you're coming in and looking for a job and making sure you convey that, and then living that, not just being lip service, but really living that, I think is what's going to make you successful, not just with Disney, but I probably would say with all the folks up here and in any industry you go into.
Any job that you get into, you have to love it, and the best thing you can do is be enthusiastic about it. I'm a professor at University of Florida, and I look for enthusiasm.
I always say I've had this job, my current job I've just had for a month or so, but I've had something very similar to this for the last 2 years, and it is the most challenging job I have ever had. But it is by far the most rewarding job outside of being a mom. because I get to change and improve a community every single day. I take that incredibly seriously. And every person who works here gets to do the same thing. So it is a lot of fun, a lot of work, well worth it though at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I would say if you spend some time in news and you work really hard and you just find out it's not really for you, it's okay. There is life after news. I think as all of us are an example of that. And so you can still do media and journalism even if you're not in a newsroom, and you can still work with people in a newsroom, but kind of create your own path outside of it. Every job that I worked outside of news, I ended up pitching. I can be your marketing director, or I can write for you, I can create content for you, and that kind of led me to where I am now. I ended up doing entertainment reporting, which I thought I would never do. And now, as an independent journalist, when I see an event like Oprah's Life You Want Tour, which was a dream of mine, I pitched to be media and I got credentials, and I didn't expect that. So just kind of take a risk, especially if you end up being an independent journalist. Just if you overhear somebody talking about something that you love, or just there's stories all the time that you can cover, and then pitch them to different outlets too.
Hi there, my name is Kat Wiles. I'm with the UNF group, of course. And so as a lot of us, as you said, are coming to graduation day, what are some do's and don'ts of facilitating relationships, whether you be PR, whether you be broadcasting, journalism, anything, marketing? What are some obvious and not so obvious do's and don'ts on what to do to facilitate and build and keep relationships amongst other people in communication?
I'm going to go back to, I'm just going to back again. I know I probably sound like your mom when I say this, but you be genuine, you be yourself, you be honest, transparent. Nothing takes the place of that. Be research, be well read, know who you're talking to. Don't waste people's times going to the wrong person when who you really needed was their colleague who sits 5 over, and you would know by reading their social media posts, as was suggested earlier. So you definitely want to be considerate of other people's time, but I just go back to just be genuine, be yourself. Don't try to change who you are, and that it will work. 9 out of 10 times that's going to work for you.
Let me just add one do, and that is once you have an interview, once you've secured one, once it's over, send a thank you note. Just tell them that I enjoyed the interview, for the opportunity to come in to interview. It will help you. It will help them remember you. So send thank you notes. Just one small little tidbit.
I've been given the advice, always be persistent and be kind. And my mom, who is here, she says, talk with a smile in your voice, because you never know how it can come across to someone. And you will come across people who aren't as friendly or sociable, especially in the newsroom. Management sometimes can be tough, but you just have to receive what you can learn from that moment and just move forward in a positive way.
I would say be aware of your timing. We've had experiences where we've had folks who have been persistent and relentlessly calling when we're right in the middle of a 1,000-person news media event. We can't talk to you then. We're hosting 1,000 media. In newsrooms, just had a friend who has a college student who would desperately like to work for the network where she works. And they just announced layoffs, 350 people laid off where she works. She fortunately has a job, but many of her friends now do not. And this person is like calling and emailing, and she's thinking, you have no idea, you didn't take the time to figure out what was going on today, which you should always kind of just be aware. And so that tells me that if you want a job working for a news media outlet and you're not going to take the time to kind of do your research before you make a phone call or before you reach out, then I'm not sure this is the right fit for you. So I would just kind of be aware. Make sure you're aware of timing.
If I can add one thing to this, because we have an intern right now who I was just really impressed with, but that wasn't long ago. We were sitting at a table talking about stories, and there was a particular story, and I was debating who we would have available to do it, because I want to say it was like on a Friday, and Fridays always are tougher for us because everybody's trying to plan for the weekend. We have a lot of other things that we're doing, and she just, hey, I can do that, and she stepped up, she spoke up, and not many people do. You'd actually be surprised how many people just kind of sit back and don't really volunteer. So, I mean, don't volunteer for something you can't do, and ask a lot of questions, get some guidance if you need it, but, volunteer on occasion. Yeah, show that initiative, absolutely. And she did the job. She did a really good job, and she has, since then, done remarkably well. She's not shy at all. In a very appropriate, professional way. It's been nice.
Can I add just a comment to what you're saying, if that's okay? The other thing I've seen, and I've been fortunate enough to hire a lot of people as well as manage, and I've done both even with millennials, and you made the comment that you said communication skills, but I think it's even more important is interpersonal skills and the power of networking. Like, I'm really excited to see all of you today, and I don't even know if you realize what a great opportunity it is to meet the people that are here today, or all of us that are here, that someday we'll be able to help you. You probably heard your parents say never burn a bridge, and that's absolutely true, but networking is not just connecting with someone on LinkedIn. It's not just getting friends online. Those interpersonal relationships and those communication skills you build between people is so critical. It helps you with your acumen and presentation, and especially, I would say, journalism on both sides of the fence, both whether you're in PR, marketing, or as a journalist. The way you present yourself is so critical to the way someone reads you or the way that they perceive you. So my advice would be is any opportunity you get to expand and perfect and challenge yourself to, strengthen those interpersonal skills, take the opportunity. The other thing that really helped me was when I saw someone that I looked up to and I wanted to emulate, I asked, would you be my mentor? Will you help guide me in my career and my skill sets? And I kept a list of people and things that I learned from each of those people over the last 15, 20 years that I practiced. And it's just been a great thing. So my advice would be, when you find someone that you're impressed with or that you're like, wow, I'm really comfortable, I have great confidence in, don't be afraid to say, hey, go back to them as a mentor, because they've helped sculpted who I am today and made me a better practitioner. And I think that applies to all sides of the fence.
Well, I'll tell you, in that interpersonal skill part, we actually had something not long ago, to tell you how seriously I take that. We had an applicant who sounded great, talked to the person on the phone, came from another state, brought him in, sounded all really great. Interpersonal skills were just not great. And the person didn't get the job. Yeah. Here's the thing, we have smaller rooms, and this isn't just in a newsroom, but in any business that you go to anymore, there are not as many people. So I have a phrase, I won't use it because I'm on camera. I'm not going to do it. But it's I'll just say no jerk policy. It's just too small of a room anymore to have people who don't work well together, because we have to figure out those team dynamics, and it makes a difference. So you kind of can't be a jerk.
Yeah.
People will notice, and I mean, it might get you so far. It might help you for certain things, but just fundamentally, it's just not going to. And somebody's going to call you on it at some point, and it was the person's job to lose, and they lost it. All based on like one day of interviews that just didn't feel right to anyone who talked to the person. So it was unfortunate, but it happens. So again, I sound like mom, but it is what it is.
Okay. Hi, I'm Molly Brady, and first I just want to say thank you so much for opening this to the general public and not just students, because then old farts like me wouldn't be here if you hadn't opened it up. And you really are terrific. I'm ready to go back to school. I'm so jealous. So I just have a few comments and a question. First, I'd like to say, Mom, that you said several times that the purpose of the media is to shine a light, right? And to enlighten and to teach. Everybody's been talking about that as your role. But, I listened to that same NPR interview this morning and they were talking about Eureka Gardens. And this guy called in and he was angry. He was angry. Why did the Times Union, why didn't they report on this earlier? Why didn't they? You're bad, you didn't do your job. And I was thinking, wow, you know, they have such high expectations. And I even noticed it in some of the comments here, is, well, what did you do to follow up? What do you know, why didn't you take care of it? So I think that the media, this is just comment, but there is a lot of high expectations from all of you, that you're, in fact, held to a higher standard. It's not too hard to exceed those standards, but than a politician. You know, you're expected to act on it. You're expected to do something about it. And so that's just a comment. I think that's not the role of the media. In fact, if you got into that role, and there's some that do, then you become an activist. You become, you're not going to be credible anymore. Right. So that's my own position. I think when you have gotten active, especially in the Times Union, it's because you sued to get information.
Right.
And that's your role, getting information. You weren't suing to make an action happen to cure a problem other than the information gathering problem. So anyhow, I think it's great that all of you kind of have that line. And you know you don't step beyond it. So just that comment. Then another comment, we talked a lot about social media. And I sometimes look at social media as a lot of noise. The internet is a lot of noise. And I don't think that's going to be true of the students that are here, but my 23-year-old grandson used to, I don't know where he gets it now, but used to get most of his news from the Daily, Jon Stewart. That's where he got his news, okay? So it was clearly a little, I mean, it's humorous, so, and it was slanted. And my 19-year-old grandson just told me the other day, because he comes up with the weirdest things. And I asked him, what do you get most of your Drudge Report? I didn't even know the Drudge Report was still around. But, I mean, it concerns me that because they're so simple and the internet, and thank God for Snopes.com, thanks God for all the PolitiFact,
Check.
all the ones that are the fact check, and that you actually have fact check in the paper. Thank goodness. Because people send me stuff or tell me stuff that's so absurd that they read it on the internet or they got it on social media or somebody told them. And they believe it. They believe it. And it's scary. And so that leads me to my one question. My one question is for the audience. And really, I just want to, real quick, how many people in here read a newspaper every day?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. How many read print? Okay, how many read that? Oh, there you go. How many people don't read newspapers on a daily basis?
Don't read the newspaper. Thank you.
The gentleman sitting next to me, the physician, he reads 4 papers a day. The Washington Post, the Times Union, the Wall Street Journal, and New York Times, and New York Times. You know, 4 newspapers.
That is awesome.
I know. I do that. So I just think I'm a little bit worried about the future of the newspaper. And I think the newspapers, the written, are the most important because they have the time to do in-depth. And it's not to say that there's not an important role for all of them, but I just worry about it.
Well, I appreciate the worry, and I very much appreciate the support that we get from our community because we do get incredible support. I'm here to tell you, we're not going anywhere. We will be here for a long time. We know what our role is, and we are working so hard to continue to be relevant, to continue to educate. And we are still financially very, very strong. We'll still be here for a long time.
If I can ask a question, I'm sorry. If you guys know, how many of your parents read the newspaper? Right. So, in my personal experience, I share news with my mom. Sometimes I'll come across something on social media, and then she'll bring it up to me, and I'll be like, "No, they didn't say that," and she'll be like, "No, but on Good Morning America, they said this." So, I think those relationships are still important too, because the most trusted way of exchanging information is word of mouth. So, I think it's easy to get scared, but I think in the end, it does balance out.
Just a follow-up question, Dave Bertolli. You all have websites now, and one of my favorite websites is Wikipedia when I want to get a quick synopsis of history. And more or less fact that's been somewhat peer-reviewed. That's in addition to scientific journals that are peer-reviewed and fact-checked. Have you guys, with the websites, given any thought to having a Wikipedia-type page for those stories like the pension fund that go on and on and on with citations, so that, you know, those I've been following the pension fund story now for 3 years, and I can't tell you who's responsible. I don't know. So is there some way of having an archive that's easy for people to read, where we can cut right, you know, you get the facts as they develop, as you discover those facts, but then also have that site updated so it's current?
Sure.
Is that economically feasible?
It's difficult economically, but I will say this: there are times that we've taken a step back. So last year it was a big focus for us, not just the daily stuff, but there were 3 weekends. I think we did them over like 6 or 8 weeks, where we took a step back and we tried to tell you everything that you needed to know about pension. And of course, then it just kept changing. That's part of the problem. It's constantly changing, and so for us to keep up with it, it would be really, really difficult because it's constant. I like Wikipedia too. I wouldn't trust it enough to quote it, but it's a good place to start to kind of give me some ideas. We are trying to figure out the best way to use Jacksonville.com so that you would be able to go to it and find information. We do have a lot of our pension stuff in one place, but again, it is always changing.
Well, I think it's manpower.
It is.
You gotta have a whole staff for that to man that portion of the website, because from time to time we will have a timeline of a particular story and where you can go to our website, but it's taken down after a period of time. And I think what you're talking about is going there and going straight to an archive like that. Yeah,
it is tough.
It will take a lot of manpower and
If
money.
we don't understand history, we're doomed to repeat it. And
Yeah.
I'm old enough to see us repeating history more than once.
Sure. But we are trying to figure out the best way to do that. And some of that is to give you the articles in one place, but there are so many. So to figure out the best way to do that, where you get to the most important ones, what is most important today versus what maybe was a year ago, and that is, again, changing.
Right.
Yeah, it is. It's money. It's people having enough to be able to do that, but then still covering the important stories that we need to tell you, because the pension fund issue is not over. We still have not figured out a way to pay for that, to get the unfunded liability down. So we're still working ahead, and we don't often have a chance to look back just for how we're going to put all the information there in a different way. We're always looking back to put it in context. So we try to do that routinely in the articles that we're providing you, but not everyday articles.
It's been a great conversation. Let's give our panelists a hand.